Good afternoon, distinguished delegates. Our sincere apologies from the Secretariat for keeping you waiting, but we're just making sure that all the documents are properly reflected on the Paper Smart portal before we start, and we should be starting in a very few minutes. We're just doing an audit of it. Thank you.
We are about to start. Good afternoon.
This is the statement on credentials that you read.
Okay, the sixth meeting of the plenary is called to order. Distinguished delegates. We have good news. I have been informed that Bangladesh has been nominated as the Vice Chair of the Committee of Permanent Representatives for the biennium representing the Asia-Pacific Group. So, do I take it that we elect Bangladesh by acclamation? It is so decided. Congratulations. Distinguished delegates, for our meeting this afternoon, I propose the following order of work. We shall take up first the question of credentials, the report of the drafting committee followed by the report of the executive board. Following this, I suggest that we proceed to the adoption of the draft resolutions. Afterwards, we shall then move to the consideration and adoption for the ministerial declaration, and delegations will then be invited to make statements after adoption of the resolutions and the ministerial declaration. We will then consider agenda item 16 of the agenda as amended during the plenary held on Monday afternoon, namely the adoption of the report of the session on the agenda items 1 to 14, including the report on the high-level segment of this session. We then will move to the consideration of the remaining agenda items 15, 16, and 18. So I correct, the agenda items that will be addressed before exclude, of course, 15, 17, and 18. And after that, we namely provisional agenda and other arrangements for the second session of the United Nations Habitat Assembly, other and matters. Therefore, delegates, should they wish to do so, can then make final statements. We will then proceed to close the session. Shall I take it that we consider this organization of work, or there are any objection on this procedure? Okay, so it is so decided. Before we proceed to these matters, may I invite the distinguished representatives to revert to the agenda item number 7, credentials of representatives and appointment of members of the Credential Committee, which pursuant to Rule 16 of the Rules of Procedure of the UN Habitat Assembly, as adopted on Monday, 27th May 2019, was earlier deferred to enable the Bureau of the UN Habitat Assembly to complete its examination of credentials. Under Rule 16 of the Rules of Procedure of the UN Habitat Assembly, the Bureau shall examine the credentials submitted by delegations to sessions of UN Habitat Assembly and report thereon on the UN Habitat Assembly. Pursuant to the foregoing Rule 16, then, I am pleased to confirm that the Bureau has examined the credentials of representatives and alternate representatives submitted by members of the UN Habitat Assembly as its first session and has found such credentials to be in order. Let me read to you, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, the status, which is the following. It is my pleasure to report on behalf of the Bureau on the status of credentials to the first session of the United Nations Habitat Assembly. The Bureau has examined and approved the credential of member states submitted in accordance with Rules 16 and 17 of the Rules of Procedure of the United Nations Habitat Assembly. As of 30 May 2019, formal credentials issued by the head of state or government or by the Minister for Foreign Affairs have been submitted to the Executive Director of the United Nations Human Settlements Program by 41 member states. Official information concerning the appointment of their representatives to the Assembly has been communicated to the Executive Director by means of a cable or a telefax from the head of a state or government or the Minister of Foreign Affairs, by means of a letter or note verbal from the mission concerned, or by means of another form of official communication by 84 member states. 68 member states have not communicated to the Executive Director of the UN Environment Programme any information regarding their representatives to the Assembly or sent a communication to the effect that they would not be attending the Assembly. So this is the report. Thank you. We have thus completed our consideration of agenda item 7. This must be approved? Okay, this is fine. Then, distinguished delegates, we now come to the next item for our work. Argentina wants to say something, please.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, President. Good afternoon, everybody. President, with the Committee on Credentials report being accepted, I am taking the floor on behalf of Argentina, Brazil, Canada, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, Guatemala, Paraguay, and Peru. We are members of the Lima Group present here in Nairobi. I'm taking the floor to highlight that the involvement of the representatives of the illegitimate regime of Nicolas Maduro in the first UN Habitat Assembly does not imply, nor should be interpreted as a tacit recognition of our countries of the regime of Nicolas Maduro, nor his representatives. We should highlight that our countries do not recognize the illegitimate regime of Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela in line with Resolution 117/19 of the Permanent Council and declarations of the Lima Group of 4th of January this year, amongst others. The members of the Lima Group, with more than 50 other countries throughout the world, recognize and support Mr. Juan Guaido as the president in charge of Venezuela and the supporter of its constitution. We will submit a note in writing to this, or in the same regard. And we hope that our declaration here will be taken into account in the minutes of the meeting. Thank you.
The floor is for the Venezuelan representative, please.
Buenas tardes, distinguidos delegados.
Good afternoon, distinguished delegates. The delegation of Venezuela categorically and profoundly rejects the statement made by the speaker who just took the floor. We request the recognition of our president, Nicolas Maduro, and its representation as a legitimately elected government. We categorically reject the statement made. Therefore, we invite everyone here present to read paragraph 84 of the new urban agenda, where it's clearly stated that the threat to self-determination of peoples and the direct decisions of peoples are key elements to take into account to achieve the goals of the new urban agenda. I highlight that this threat is not just important to Venezuela, but it's also part of the beautiful values of this assembly. So, in rejecting this declaration, we also reject this act, which seems completely contrary to the goals of this assembly. So these should be categorically rejected also by everyone else here present. Our delegation will submit a note on this as well, so it will be reported in the minutes of this meeting. And we speak here on behalf of the legitimately elected President of our country, Nicolas Maduro Moros. Thank you.
Thank you, distinguished delegates. We can now come to the next item of our work of this afternoon at the plenary.
United States.
No, they want. No, you should follow. Sri Lanka, Serbia.
May I give the floor to the United Republic of Tanzania, please?
Thank you, Chair. I think there was a miscommunication. We are trying to get the mics on, please. Sorry.
Distinguished delegates, we have, because yes, it's possible, there's been a mistake in your pushing the buttons. So we have Sri Lanka, Serbia, Sri Lanka, Ghana, Qatar, United States of America, Iraq. Okay, now it's reducing. So I go back Sri Lanka, Qatar. Okay, I have Sri Lanka, Qatar. Okay, I have Qatar, United States, Namibia. Okay. Do we have Qatar who wish to speak? No, Qatar doesn't want to speak. So yeah, please, Secretariat, remove Qatar. Does the United States want to speak? United States wants to speak. Okay.
Thank you, Chair, for giving me the floor. The United States supports the statement read by the ambassador from Argentina and in support of the Lima Group. We would join that statement, and we would be pleased to add the United States as a signatory to that note. Thank you.
Okay. It now gives me the great pleasure to give the floor to the chair of the drafting committee to introduce the draft resolutions considered by this committee. I ask kindly His Excellency Fernando Coimbra, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, distinguished delegates, in my capacity as chair of the drafting committee, I have the honor to report to plenary on the activities of the committee. The committee has met for a total of 6 informal sessions. The drafting committee commenced its work on the morning of Tuesday, 28th of May. The committee convened 2 negotiating sessions in the morning and afternoon of that day. It next convened 3 negotiating sessions in the morning, afternoon, and evening of the 29th of May. A final negotiating session was convened this very morning, 31st of May, to resolve outstanding matters. Madam President, the drafting committee has had before it, for its consideration, a total of 6 draft resolutions and 1 draft decision. 3 of these had been examined by the Committee of Permanent Representatives. 3 additional draft resolutions and 1 additional draft decision were directly submitted to this Assembly. The drafting committee has considered 5 of these 6 draft resolutions, and I have been informed by the co-sponsors of the 6th text that its subject matter will be referred to the Executive Board for consideration within its mandate. I am pleased to inform Plenary that the drafting committee has reached full agreement on the remaining 5 draft resolutions and 1 draft decision, which have all been forwarded without any bracketed text to the Plenary for its consideration at 10:30 this morning. Madam President, distinguished delegates, with your permission, I would like to use this opportunity to express my sincere thanks and great appreciation for the cooperation and understanding by the distinguished delegates and the Secretariat. I must also express my sincere appreciation and thanks to the exceptional team of professionals that have supported me in this task and that have allowed my delegation to work very hard for the success of the reform process and of this conference. These are Mr. Gustavo Barbosa and Mr. Patrick Luna. They honor, through their hard work and dedication and talent, the traditions of Brazilian diplomacy inspired by the values inscribed in the UN Charter. I would further like to express my thanks and appreciation to the Drafting Committee Secretary, Mr. Robert Louis Lettington, and his team, Marie-Pierre Tixier, Samuel Njuguna, Claudia Schöffler, Manka Bajaj, and Seldom Luciani, as well as the many officials of the UN Habitat who have made available to the Drafting Committee their valuable insights and knowledge by elaborating on the draft resolution or explaining substantive, administrative, or legal contexts. Without their effort, the work of the Drafting Committee would not have finished on time. Madam President, I hereby present to Plenary the following 5 fully agreed draft resolutions and 1 draft decision. These are 1. HSP/HA1/L4/Rev1, Draft Resolution 1/1, United Nations Human Settlements Program's Strategic Plan for the period 2020-2023. 2. HSP/HA1/L5/Rev1, Draft Resolution 1/2, United Nations System-Wide Guidelines on Safer Cities and Human Settlements, UN System-Wide Guidelines for Safer Cities and Human Settlements. 3. HSP/HA1/L6/Rev1, Draft Resolution 1/3, Enhancing Capacity Building for the Implementation of the New Urban Agenda and the Urban Dimension of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. 4. HSP/HA1/L7/Rev1, Draft Resolution 1/4, Achieving Gender Equality through the work of the United Nations Human Settlements Program to support inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable cities and human settlement. 5th, HSP/HA/1L8, Draft Resolution 1/5, Enhancing Urban-Rural Linkages for Sustainable Urbanization and Human Settlements. And 6th, HSP/HA/1L9, Draft Decision 1/3, Arrangements for the Transition Towards the New Governance Structure of UN Habitat. I thank you, Madam President, for your trust and for giving me the floor to present this report.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Coimbra. I thank the distinguished chair of the drafting committee for his introduction and for the remarkable work he conducted for reaching a consensus on the resolution. And I want all of us to applaud this committee. Now I invite our distinguished chair of the Executive Board, Ms. Laurie Dando, to introduce the draft report of the Executive Board as contained in document HSP/HA.1/L.2. Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I have the honor as chair of the Executive Board to make this report. Subsequent to the election of members of the Executive Board by this Assembly, the Board had its first meeting yesterday on Thursday, 30th May 2019. The President of the UN Habitat Assembly convened the meeting to first elect the chair of the Executive Board. Thank you for electing the United States as chair. I am honored to represent my country in this position. As its second order of business, the meeting also considered and adopted its rules of procedure, which are contained in Executive Board document HSP/EB/1/3. These rules also now appear at this Assembly as document HSP/HA/1/9 for the endorsement by the Assembly. Madam President, at the first meeting of the Executive Board, we also elected the Bureau, and we discussed our work plan and methodology of work. The meeting endorsed the draft UN system-wide guidelines on safer cities and human settlements for adoption by the UN Habitat Assembly. Finally, the meeting agreed on dates of its next meeting. The report of the Executive Board is contained in document HSP/EB/1/L1 and is also issued for purposes of this Assembly as HSP/HA/1/L2. It is my understanding that this document is up on the web on the PaperSmart portal. Before this Assembly, Madam President, are the rules of procedure of the Executive Board, which the Board has considered and adopted. The rules of procedure for the Executive Board have been forwarded to the UN Habitat Assembly for endorsement as document HSP/HA/1/9. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you very much. I thank the distinguished chair of the Executive Board also for the excellent work done in preparing the reports and for the remarkable conduct of the first meeting of the Executive Board, which was a very successful held yesterday, and I also ask for all and this a recognition applauding their work. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I also wish to bring to your attention one more document, which is the Ministerial Declaration on Innovation for Better Quality of Life in Cities and Communities, accelerated implementation of the new urban agenda towards the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals, as presented in the document HSP/HA/1/L.3.Rev1, which is before you. So you will recall that this document has benefited from the extensive consultations between myself and the member states. So distinguished delegates, excellencies, in light of the reports which were just presented to us by the chair of the drafting committee and the chair of the Executive Board, I wish to propose, given the extensive consultations that have taken place, that all the draft resolutions to be considered and adopted by the plenary by consensus, and I now invite the UN Habitat Assembly to take up the consideration of the draft resolutions which have just been introduced. Please note that statements and explanations of vote and of positions would be taken after the adoption. The following draft resolutions are before the plenary for adoption. May I read those that I'm presenting for your consideration are Resolution HSP/HA/1/L.4 Rev 1 on United Nations Human Settlements Program Strategic Plan for the period 2020-2023. Resolution HSP/HA.1/L.5 Rev 1 on United Nations System-wide Guidelines on Safer Cities and Human Settlements. Resolution HSP/HA.1/L.6 Rev 1 on capacity building for new urban agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals. Resolution HSP/HA.1/L.7 Rev 1 on achieving gender equality through the work of the United Nations Human Settlements Program to support inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable cities and human settlements. Resolution HSP/HA/1/L.8 on enhancing urban-rural linkages for sustainable urbanization and human settlements. And Decision 3 HSP/HA/1/L.9 arrangements for its arrangements. Okay, for the transitions towards the new governance structure of UN Habitat. That's all? Yes. All right. Here. Okay. Distinguished delegates, do I take it that we adopt all the draft resolutions referred to by consensus? I hear no objection. It is so decided. Thank you. As mentioned by the chair of the Executive Board of the UN Habitat Assembly held its first meeting yesterday afternoon, Thursday, May 30, 2019, and adopted its rules of procedure as contained in document HSP/EB/1/3. At that very meeting, certain technical revisions were discussed and agreed to by the Executive Board. The rules will be issued as a revised document. May I take that the UN Habitat Assembly decides to adopt Decision 2, contained in HSP/HA/1/9 that endorses the rules of procedure of the Executive Board as revised? I hear no objection. It is so decided. So we will move to the adoption of the Ministerial Declaration as contained in document HSP/HA/1/L.3 Rev 1. First, I want to thank Ambassador Erasmo Martinez, head of the Mexican delegation, for the consultation that he made of the Ministerial Declaration. Thank you very much, Ambassador, and the team of the Mexican delegation. So, we take this Ministerial Declaration And consensus, I hear no objection either. So also it's so decided. Then the floor is open for a statement from delegations. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, we are following the order that we have in our screen for giving you the floor for your statements. I then call the representative of the United States of America to take the floor.
Thank you, President, and congratulations to all for this momentous occasion. First of all, I'd like to start by thanking the Kenyan government for its hospitality and work as host of this inaugural assembly, and thank President Martha Delgado Peralta for taking on the important task of president of this first ever UN Habitat Assembly and for her leadership throughout this week. I would also like to thank Executive Director Maimouna Mohd Sharif and especially Ambassador Fernando Coimbra for their skilled leadership in the preparations for this assembly, not just in the CPR, but throughout this process where they work so diligently to advance governance reform efforts to put Habitat on the path to success. The United States has joined consensus on all of the resolutions and decisions made throughout this assembly. Given the length of our explanation of our position statement, I will submit the full statement in writing, but I'd like to take this opportunity to highlight some elements in that respect. As this was the first meeting of the Assembly and the Executive Board, in addition to the Ministerial Declaration, we have reviewed UN Habitat's strategic plan and a number of resolutions, all of which required careful oversight and review. First, we would like to note that the United States attaches the greatest importance to the contribution of civil society and other stakeholders to the work of the United Nations. We look forward to continuing to work with the member states of UN Habitat Assembly to adopt a stakeholder policy that is inclusive, transparent, and fair. Civil society organizations, NGOs, academic institutions, the private sector, and other stakeholders play an important role in sustainable urban development. Their expertise, advocacy, and participation are essential to the success of our work. Our discussions and work will have even greater value if their voices are heard. We also want to take this opportunity to make important points of clarification on some of the language we see reflected across multiple resolutions in the 2020-2025 strategic plan. While the United States supports key elements of the UN Habitat's new strategic plan, notably its emphasis on the private sector and enhancing social networks to strengthen conflict prevention and recovery, we are concerned that the plan attempts to cover too wide a range of areas and believe a more strategic focus would contribute to the success of Habitat's program. With respect to the Paris Agreement and climate change language in the strategic plan, the United States reaffirms that the U.S. administration announced its intention to withdraw from the Paris Agreement as soon as it is eligible to do so, consistent with the terms of that agreement. Therefore, the Paris Agreement and climate change language is without prejudice to the U.S. positions. We affirm our support for promoting economic growth and improving energy security while protecting the environment. Furthermore, we are concerned that including a domain of change in the strategic plan for UN Habitat to strengthen climate action intrudes on the work of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, or the UNFCCC. For UN Habitat to act as a catalyst for connections and actions in the global climate arena is beyond the competence, expertise, and mandate of UN Habitat, and is particularly inappropriate in light of the role of the UNFCCC and its ongoing negotiations. The United States further understands that neither the resolutions being adopted nor the strategic plan imply that states must join human rights or other instruments to which they are not a party or otherwise implement obligations under these instruments. The United States is not a party to the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, and the rights contained therein, including the right to an adequate standard of living, and any rights derived therefrom are not justiciable in U.S. courts. Likewise, the United States is not a party to the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination against Women and consequently does not have obligations under this agreement. We interpret references to obligations of states as applicable only to the extent they have assumed such obligations. Furthermore, in joining consensus, the U.S. does not recognize any change in the current state of treaty or customary international law. We also noted several references in the resolution to the 2030 Agenda. The United States recognizes the 2030 Agenda as a global framework for sustainable development that can help countries work towards global peace and prosperity. We applaud the call for shared responsibility, including national responsibility in the 2030 Agenda, and emphasize that all countries have a role to play in achieving its vision in a manner that is consistent with the rights and obligations of states under international law. We also take this opportunity to make important points of clarification regarding the affirmation of the Addis Ababa Action Agenda. Specifically, we note that much of the trade-related language in the Addis Outcome document has been overtaken by events since July 2015, and our reaffirmation of the outcome document has no standing for ongoing work and negotiations that involve trade. Finally, with respect to textual references to gender, the United States champions the empowerment of women and girls and knows that only through their meaningful and fair inclusion can we conquer the challenges facing us both individually and collectively. In dealing with women's issues and women's empowerment, we all too often fall back on vague terminology. We insist on speaking clearly about our goals, gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls. We believe strongly when talking about women, we need to talk about women. With respect to the new urban agenda, the United States believes that each member has a sovereign right to determine how it conducts trade with other countries. In cases where the United States has applied sanctions, they have been used with specific objections in mind, including as a means to promote and return to a rule of law or democratic systems, to respect human rights and fundamental freedoms, or to prevent threats to international security. It is our view that the United States must respect the independent mandates of other processes and institutions, including trade negotiations, and must not involve itself in decisions and actions in other forums, including the World Trade Organization. This includes calls to undermine incentives for innovation, such as technology transfer that is not voluntary and on mutually agreed terms. Finally, it is our intention that this statement applies to actions on all agenda items and resolutions taken up by the Assembly. We request that the written statement, of which I have just given a summary, and which the United States will submit immediately, be made a part of the official record. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I call the distinguished delegate of Turkey to take the floor.
Honorable Madam President, Madam Executive Director, distinguished delegates. At the outset, allow me to congratulate you and the Kenyan government for the successful conduct of the first session of UN Habitat Assembly, which has gathered together the partners of Global Urban Agenda. The governance and institutional reform processes of UN Habitat and its new strategic plan under the new vision will no doubt help scale up urban climate action. We believe the first session of the UN Habitat Assembly should also be considered as an important milestone in the run-up to the UN Secretary-General's Climate Action Summit in September, as highlighted in paragraph 12 of the Ministerial Declaration we just adopted. Turkey and Kenya have undertaken the co-leadership of the infrastructure, cities and local action track of the summit with great dedication, and UN Habitat has proven to be a reliable partner in the preparations. The ICLA track, co-led by Turkey and Kenya, has now become a strong and visionary coalition with the participation of Mexico, Germany, Canada, Singapore and Brazil. The coalition ambitiously works on preparing transformative initiatives to scale up local and national climate action, including 1.5 degrees compatible plans and strategies, and to provide accessible finance to low-carbon and resilient infrastructure projects, including in buildings and transport. The ambitious goal of achieving these targets and reaching carbon neutrality by 2050 requires integrated partnership and dedicated efforts from national governments, private sector, cities, NGOs, and citizens. Together with Kenya and UN Habitat Secretariat, we have taken the opportunity of the United Habitat Assembly to organize a ministerial roundtable on the infrastructure, cities, and local action track at the margins of UN Habitat Assembly to review progress made so far. We will intensify our efforts to strengthen this partnership through our strong initiatives that will be assessed at the stock-taking meeting in the end of June in Abu Dhabi. As a reflection of our ambition in scaling up local climate action, we are proud to announce that we will soon endorse a call for action together with our coalition partners that will also be open to all member states. The ICLA coalition invites all member states to contribute to ICLA's joint efforts in the run-up to the Climate Action Summit and further beyond. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I call the delegate of Kenya right now to take the floor.
President of the first session of the Assembly, Martha Delgado Peralta, Executive Director and Undersecretary General Maimuna Maud Sharif, Honorable Ministers and Heads of Delegations, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I'm delighted to make this statement on behalf of the Government of Kenya. I take this early opportunity to appreciate the Executive Director and her staff for successfully organizing this historic first UN Habitat Assembly. I also wish to congratulate you, Madam President, and your Bureau for excellent leadership, stewardship, and hard work, which has led to the successful conclusion and landmark outcomes of this Assembly. We can also look forward to your leadership during the second session of the UN Habitat Assembly. We feel greatly honored and privileged to have hosted over 4,000 delegates in our country and take this opportunity to thank all member states for your political and diplomatic support, which largely contributed to the overwhelming participation at this Assembly. I acknowledge that this has been a very successful session. We have made key milestones, which include the adoption of 5 resolutions, approval of UN Habitat Strategic Plan, the work program and budget, as well as the rules of procedure for both Assembly and the Executive Board, amongst others. I wish to call upon all of us to take advantage of the new governance structure to ensure an invigorated UN Habitat that is more responsive to member state needs and accelerate implementation of the new urban agenda, Agenda 2030 and SDG 11. Allow me to thank state members and partners who participated at the special event on infrastructure, cities, and local action track, co-led by Kenya and Turkey, with the support from the UN Habitat and coalition partners, namely Brazil, Canada, Germany, Mexico, and Singapore. It is our hope that member states and other partners will join this track. As co-leads, we urge member states to endorse the ICLA call for action founded on 7 guiding principles. These will support the joint efforts of ICLA coalition in leveraging local climate at the very city level and foster integrated partnership and collaborative climate action across all actors and all levels of government. I once again take this opportunity to thank all member states, stakeholders, and partners who have pledged their support, both in cash and in kind, to support the important work of UN Habitat. Kenya wishes to reiterate her commitment and support, which our head of state, His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta, earlier demonstrated during his inaugural address to this Assembly. Finally, I invite you all to take some time to sample our world-renowned Masai Mara National Park, where we have waived off the entry fees this weekend. We wish you a safe journey as we look forward to hosting you again during the second session of the UN Habitat Assembly, if not early. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your statement. I call now the distinguished delegate of Costa Rica to take the floor.
Thank you, President of UN Habitat Assembly. Good afternoon, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It is an honor to speak here today at this fair historical assembly of UN Habitat. In this century, half of the global population lives in cities. Half of them are women and girls. That is almost 2 billion people. Women play a critical role in society. Women play a critical role in moving today's society towards urban sustainability. At the same time, women and girls are affected by climate change and are differently affected by city life than men. They suffer for air pollution, they face inadequate sanitation, they don't receive equal pay, they often suffer gender-based violence and discrimination. However, this is often not recognized. Gender equality is often still a dream for women in cities, in slums, in all kinds of human settlements. Costa Rica believes this needs to change, and to change now. Fortunately, the UN Habitat Governing Council at its 23rd session in 2011 adopted the resolution on gender equality and empowerment of women in sustainable urban development. Following, the advisory group on gender issues was established. This group, which I am privileged to be part of, is give a stronger emphasis to the importance of gender equality and women's empowerment. It is putting women at the forefront as vital agents of change in human settlement work. Now it is time to mainstream a gender perspective into all policies and work of UN Habitat. We must work collaboratively to enhance gender mainstreaming. For this reason, Costa Rica, Colombia, European Union, and member states, Norway, Chile, Mexico, Uruguay, and Zambia, we were proposing a new resolution to ensure we better align gender equality programming with national policies. We are very happy today that this resolution was adopted by the first ever Assembly of UN Habitat. We must promote an environment of gender mainstreaming at all levels. Therefore, I urge all to dedicate adequate financial and human resources to gender equality programming at the country level. It is essential we strengthen the coordination of gender-responsive operations. We have to secure technical expertise for gender equality in planning and implementation. We must provide ongoing capacity development and collect, analyze, use, and disseminate comparable data disaggregated by gender and age to guide program investments. Only then we will be able to make a change. Now it is the time that we step up, that we make the change happen, that we achieve gender equality and empowerment of women in cities and other human settlements, building from the new urban agenda, applying innovative approaches that showcase how we can achieve gender equality, working with the governments, business, and civil society, applying green and blue solutions, solutions that are truly gender equal. I would like to thank my sincere thanks to Mexico for their leadership, the Secretariat, and all member states for their contributions to make this assembly successful. Thank you very much for your attention.
Muchas gracias, distinguida delegada. Thank you very much. Now I call the distinguished delegate of the European Union to take the floor.
Madam President of the Assembly, distinguished delegates, Madam Executive Director, I'm speaking on behalf of the European Union and its member states. Reaching the end of this historical first meeting of the UN Habitat Assembly, we would like to express our sincere appreciation and thanks to the President of the Assembly, Ms. Marta Delgado, and her team for the efficient handling of the conference, including the finalization of the Ministerial Declaration, which the EU and its member states warmly welcome. We wish you, Madam President, as well as the newly elected Bureau, all successes, including in setting up the second assembly. We would also like to highlight the exceptional contribution to the success of this meeting of the outgoing chair of the Committee of Permanent Representatives, Ambassador Fernando Coimbra of Brazil and his team. Sir, you took a great responsibility on your shoulders, starting from negotiations of the governance reform, and then through the preparations of the Assembly to its successful end by facilitating the uneasy work of the drafting committee reviewing the package on UNHA resolutions. Our thanks also go to the Executive Director, Madam Maimouna Sharif, and the Secretariat for their hard work and support throughout the preparatory process and the meeting itself. We are indeed proud of the outcomes of the first assembly. Beyond the mentioned declaration, we agreed the package of important resolutions, including on the mainstreaming gender equality, proposed by Colombia and Costa Rica and co-sponsored by EU and other member states. We have agreed a focused and visionary strategic plan for the period of 2020-2023 with its 4 domains of change that will guide the work of UN Habitat for the next years and make its deliverables even more relevant. We also welcome the endorsement of the guidelines for safer cities and the commitment to continue working on the stakeholders' engagement policy. Madam President, the first meeting of the Assembly also marked the inauguration of the new governance of UN Habitat. After many years of discussions, we shall finally see the results of these endeavors in a strengthened, more accountable, transparent, efficient, and effective organization. We would like to welcome the inauguration of the Executive Board and to congratulate on the election of its members, of its Bureau, and its chair, Ambassador Lori Dando. And allow me to say that we are very proud that we have, for the very first time in history of this organization, 3 powerful and knowledgeable women leading Habitat in the next few years. The EU will continue working with the UN Habitat on the follow-up of this assembly, as well as on the monitoring and reporting of the implementation of the new urban agenda. We are honored that the 11th session of the World Urban Forum, which is essential for these objectives, will be hosted by one of our member states in Katowice, Poland. Distinguished delegates, observers, colleagues in the Secretariat, the EU and its member states wish to ensure of their lasting commitment to sustainable urbanization and human settlements. We are dedicated to the successful implementation of the new urban agenda, the 2030 agenda, and the Paris Agreement, which are essential to achieve a better quality of life for all in cities and communities. We are convinced that we have just made a milestone in setting policy directions and a framework towards these objectives. I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for presenting your statement. Then I call the distinguished delegate of Indonesia to take the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. On behalf of the government of Indonesia, we would like to congratulate you once again for assuming the presidency of the first UN Habitat Assembly. We are confident that under your able leadership, the UN Habitat will be able to fulfill its visions and programs under the new urban agenda and SDGs. We would also like to congratulate and give our utmost appreciation to the Executive Director, Madam Maimouna Sharif, for her excellent leadership in the governance reform and in the preparation and convening of this historic inaugural session of the UN Habitat. We must say, Madam Maimouna, you make our Southeast Asian region proud. Following on the theme of the West Java governor in his keynote speech, Indonesia is happy to have presented the governor to the Assembly. We hope his speech on bringing evidence-based happiness into the urban planning policy provides a fresh and innovative perspective and inspire many in this Assembly, particularly other local and regional governments. We look forward to the new UN Habitat and stand ready to work together with the UN Habitat and other nations towards achieving the new urban agenda and SDGs to improve the lives of our people. Finally, we are sure that, like us, you will leave Nairobi happy. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your statement. Finally, I call the distinguished delegate of Malawi to take the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. My delegation would like to begin by joining others who have spoken before in congratulating you, Madam President, on your election as President of UN Habitat. Malawi would like to take this opportunity to also sincerely thank you and appreciate the honor bestowed upon it by African states for the country to sit on the executive board as well as perform the function of a rapporteur. Malawi also takes pleasure at this moment in saluting and adopting the resolution on enhancing urban-rural linkages for urbanization and human settlements. I thank you most sincerely, Madam President, for this opportunity to make a short statement. Thank you for your attention.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, thank you very much. I have another participant. I call the distinguished delegate of Niger to take the floor, please.
Madam President, this is the first session of UN Habitat Assembly. So, speaking to you, Madam President, members of the Bureau, and heads of delegations and ministers, and Executive Director of UN Habitat, distinguished delegates. It's a pleasure for me to read this closing statement on behalf of the African states. Firstly, Madam President, I would like to convey to you our gratitude and our congratulations, and also express our gratitude to your team for a job well done. Everyone is in agreement here that this first UN Habitat Assembly was a full success. We have made substantial progress by adopting a number of key resolutions aimed at accelerating sustainable urbanization and enhancing the quality of human establishments. We have approved the 2020-2025 plan, including internal rules of procedure. The African Group would also express its gratitude to the Executive Director of UN Habitat, Ms. Maimuna Mohammed Said Sharif, and to her assistant, Mr. Victor Kisov, as well as to all the staff of UN Habitat for the outstanding way in which they have planned the meeting and the outstanding results achieved by this first UN Habitat Assembly, and the invaluable work which this organization carries out throughout the world. We attach great importance to the mandate of UN Habitat. The African states recognize the contribution of well-planned urbanization and the way it contributes to reducing inequalities and contributes to structural economic reform in urban and rural areas. The results of the discussions which were held today under the topic of innovation for a better quality of life in cities and communities will be considered by the subcommittee of Special Committee number 8 of the African Union. It's housing and the urban environment, which will allow us to draw up a model law on urban development and to encourage capacity building at a national, regional, international level. In Africa, access to decent housing and a reduction of insecurity and vulnerability in the face of disasters affecting our communities and built-up areas are all fields which require the expertise of UN Habitat. We're impatient to cooperate closely with UN Habitat to meet all of the challenges which we are facing in our cities and villages, including those facing refugees and displaced persons living in camps And we do this to ensure that no one is left behind. In this respect, the participatory approach should be strengthened to guarantee that the development and planning of our territories and the construction of public housing take into account the specific needs of the elderly, of the disabled, of children, women and youth. Madam President, collectively and individually, African member states wish to reiterate their support to UN Habitat. A great many have announced their financial contributions aimed at backing the implementation of the new strategic plan of UN Habitat. Africa would like to furthermore see UN Habitat adopt an innovative methodology of work to bolster its presence on the ground in our states to seize all possible new opportunities and thus better assist member states. I call upon member states to facilitate the presence of UN Habitat in their countries and to disperse their annual contributions. And finally, Africa invites the Executive Board to work in close cooperation with UN Habitat for the launch of the strategic plan running from 2020 to 2025 in keeping with rules of procedure of the Assembly and the Executive Board and the setting up of mechanisms which enable us to monitor progress achieved in the implementation of the resolutions which we have adopted today. We await with a great deal of interest the results which will be reviewed in 2023 during the next session of the Assembly. Madam President, Madam Executive Director, distinguished delegates, congratulations to all once again. I wish all of you a safe flight home and I thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, distinguished delegate, for your statement. I call now the distinguished delegate of Ethiopia to take the floor.
President of the session of the UN Habitat Assembly, members of the Assembly Bureau and Executive Board, honorable ministers and heads of delegations, Executive Director of UN Habitat, distinguished delegates. I begin my closing remark by congratulating you, Madam President, and your team for a job well done. Ethiopia aligns its statement with the statement read by the Republic of Niger on behalf of Africa. By all accounts, this has been a very successful first section of the UN Habitat Assembly. We have made one key achievement by adopting a number of key resolutions aiming at accelerating sustainable urbanization and quality development of human settlements. More importantly, the Assembly has approved the UN Habitat Strategic Plan 2020 to 2025 and the rules of procedures for both the Assembly and the Executive Board. Ethiopia also thanks the Executive Director of UN Habitat, Ms. Maimouna Mahmoud Sharif, and her excellent team for delivering a smooth, well-planned, well-executed, and successful first UN Habitat Assembly, and also for the valuable work that is organizing this doing all over the world. As indicated in the statement of the African Group, the outcomes of the discussions held this week under the main theme of innovation for a better quality life in cities and communities will be taken up in the African Union Subcommittee of the Specialized Technical Committee number 8 on Housing and Urban Development, and Ethiopia will play its part in the realization of this noble practice. Madam President, Executive Director, distinguished delegates, organizations, once again, I wish all a safe journey and back home, and I thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have exhausted the list of participants right now, distinguished delegate. Then I suggest that we shall now move to the consideration of the agenda item number 16, namely adoption of the report of the session and adoption of the report of the first meeting of the Executive Board. In this connection, I wish to recall the established practice at the United Nations on the consideration and the adoption of draft reports which are purely procedural in nature and is meant to be a factual account of the events that took place during the present session of the UN Habitat Assembly. I hope that delegations have had the opportunity to review the summary on the draft reports. These reports may contain square brackets in certain areas because the necessary information on the meeting, including the present meeting, was not available at the time of the preparation of the reports. Accordingly, I will propose that these reports be finalized by the rapporteur of the UN Habitat Assembly as required to ensure that it accurately reflects information, including on the present meeting. I also wish to recall that these reports are subsequently considered by the Economic and Social Council and the General Assembly. Therefore, there is a need for the UN Habitat Assembly to adopt their reports for onward transmission to ECOSOC and the General Assembly, and to enable those two organs to take appropriate decisions required by them in their reports. Do I hear any objection on this? Okay, then it is so decided. I now invite our distinguished rapporteur to introduce the draft reports on the plenary on agenda items 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15, including the high-level segment of this session contained in the documents HSP/HA/1/L.1 and HSP/HA/1/L.1/add.1. I now call on Mr. Wu Peng. Ms. Rapporteur, you have the floor.
Thank you. Distinguished delegates, I wish to join the President in expressing my sincere gratitude for the hard working all of you have done. The report of the Assembly has been issued and is issued as document HSP/HA/1/L1. In that report, we tackled the organizational session, including opening session. We also addressed the issue of the election of the President of the UN Habitat Assembly. We also addressed the opening ceremony and opening statements. We give account of a tendency by various categories of participants. We then provide the report of the Committee of Permanent Representatives and also an account of the adoption of the rules of procedure and the agenda adopted for this session. We also reflect the elections of the officers, the credential of representatives, and we also addressed the organization of our work for this session. We have reflected the election of the member of the Executive Board and also the work of the drafting committee of this session. We have also addressed that various policy statements and reports by the Executive Director, such as the activities of UN Habitat reviewing of progress on the implementation of the new urban agenda and the 2030 agenda for sustainable development, and the report of the World Urban Forum. Madam President, we have also reflected the high-level segment and dialogue on the special theme for the first session of the Assembly, including both the high-level segment and the interactive dialogues. We have also given an account of the strategic plan of the UN Human Settlements Program. And then we have provided you with a provisional agenda for the second session of the Assembly. Forming part of the report would be the resolution that you have already adopted, including statements that member states wish to be reflected. Madam President, you will notice in the report there are areas that have brackets on them. Those brackets are simply because of the need for factual information, such as the name of an individual or a number. So what I am requesting from the Assembly, Madam President, is to allow the rapporteur the responsibility of completing the report of the Assembly so as to finalize it and make it available for member states. I thank you, Madam President.
I thank very much the distinguished rapporteur for his introduction of the reports on the plenary. Thank you very much. You would recall that, yeah?
Legal advisor wants the floor.
Legal advisor, do you have the, no, doesn't want the floor.
Go ahead.
Okay, go ahead. I thank the distinguished rapporteur then. You would recall that Mrs. Lori Dando reported earlier to us on the report of the Executive Board as contained in document HSP/HA.1/L.2. Then may I take it that the UN Habitat Assembly wishes to adopt the draft reports of the plenary as contained in documents HSP/HA/1/L.1 and HSP/HA/1/L.1 and the draft report of the Executive Board as presented by Mrs. Lori Dando and contained in the document HSP/HA.1/L.2 and to authorize the rapporteur to finalize their reports in light of the proceedings of this afternoon, and that the UN Habitat Assembly adopt the draft report of its work at the first session. I hear no objection, so it is so decided. I thank again our distinguished rapporteur and the chair of the Executive Board for the excellent work done in preparing their reports. Distinguished delegates, we have concluded the substantive part of our agenda, namely agenda items 7, 16, and have only now to deal with agenda items 15, 17, and 18. Distinguished delegates are now invited to turn to agenda item 15, which is provisional agenda and other arrangements for the second session of the UN Habitat Assembly. With regard to this agenda item, the UN Habitat Assembly has before it for consideration document HSP/HA/L.9 entitled Arrangements for the Transition Towards the New Governance Structure of UN Habitat. That contains a provisional agenda and dates for the second session of the UN Habitat Assembly, which has been extensively discussed in the drafting committee and that we just adopted. So I take that agenda item 16 is now converted, and I now move to agenda item 17, which is any other matters. So are there any matters that delegations wish to consider which is not on the agenda? All right. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I would like to move to agenda item 17, closure of session. I give the floor to the Executive Director for her closing statements, Mrs. Maimouna Mohd Sharif, Executive Director of the UN Habitat. Thank you very much.
Madam President of the first session of the UN Habitat Assembly, distinguished members of the Bureau of the UN Habitat Assembly, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues and dear friends. We have just been on a 7-day journey together. The journey took us 14 years to prepare, but judging by the outcomes and looking at your exhausted but happy faces, it was worth our time. The journey took us long nights and long days to reach our destination, but it was worth our patience and determination. Today, my dear friends, we are here. We have reached the destination of a new UN habitat. It is a new beginning. Along the way, we stumbled and fell a few times, but we never stopped getting back up. This is the spirit of our new UN habitat, always committed and ready to fight for what is right. Along the way, we stopped at a very interesting station, notably Global Stakeholders Forum, Business Leaders Dialogue, Urban Solution Exhibitions, Ministerial Roundtable on Infrastructure, Cities and Local Action, Young Women to Women Forum, Gender Forum on Women and New Urban Agenda, One UN Meeting, Interfaith Dialogue, High-Level Dialogue on Theme of the Assembly, Regional and Local Government Forum, 57 side events, and plenary sessions. These were all breathtaking and inspiring stops, which have enabled us to reach the following outcomes. Adopting 5 resolutions and 1 decision to enhance the work of UN Habitat, notably resolution on the United Nations Human Settlement Program Strategic Plan for the period of 2020 to 2023, resolution on the United Nations System-Wide Guidelines on Safer Cities and Human Settlement, UN System-Wide Guideline for Safer Cities and Human Settlements, and third, resolutions on enhancing capacity buildings for the implementation of the new urban agenda and the urban dimension of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, resolution on achieving gender equality through the work of the United Nations Human Settlements Program to support inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable cities and human settlement, resolution on enhancing urban-rural linkages for sustainable urbanization and human settlements, and decision on arrangement for the transition towards the new governance structure of UN Habitat. Confirming the relevance and the role of UN Habitats through the national statements, as well as partnership and pledging conference through which 21 countries pledged USD 152 million. These countries are China, Colombia, Republic of Congo, France, the Gambia, Germany, Ghana, India, Japan, Kenya, Madagascar, Malawi, Morocco, Nigeria, Norway, Poland, South Africa, South Sudan, Switzerland, Sweden, and Zambia. A ministerial declaration reaffirming the urgent need to improve quality of life for all and to promote sustainable patterns of consumption and production, including through, but not limited to, smart technologies, sustainable lifestyles, resource efficiency, and moving towards, and among other sustainable development strategies, a circular economy. Raising the profile of sustainable urbanization issues through record participation, we mobilized 4 heads of state, 49 ministers, 10 vice ministers, 63 mayors, 127 national governments, 344 sub-national governments, 1,057 stakeholders, including the private sectors, a total of 4,145 registered participants. developing a better understanding of the main causes of the challenges of urbanization around the world, identifying innovative solutions and best practices to urgently and successfully make the best of the opportunities of sustainable urban development, including non-traditional financing mechanisms for development of cities and regions. Establishing strategic alliances with national and local governments, the private sector, stakeholders, civil society, and international institutions to scale up innovative solutions in sustainable urbanization and human settlement. Distinguished delegates, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we will look back at this week and remember the historic milestone. You have all participated in the first session of the UN Habitat Assembly. You have elected its first president and the first bureau. And we had also had the first meeting of the UN Habitat Executive Board with its first chair and board members. On that note, allow me to share with you my 3 heartwarming moments I will always remember. 1, I will always remember the drive for innovation for sustainable urban solutions shown here. It was nothing short of inspiring. We are very proud to have brought the brightest and the most creative minds together in Nairobi. Our plan is to continue attracting the best ideas, best practices to achieve our vision of a better quality of life for all in an urbanizing world. I will always remember that we have a common drive to transform cities and communities through better access to basic services and sustainable mobility, secure access to land and adequate affordable housing, smart and livable cities, resource efficiency and adaptation to climate change, social integration and improved living standards for refugees, migrant and internally displaced persons. I will strongly remember the victory of multilateralism. Yes, multilateralism won. As the late President Abraham Lincoln said, a house divided against itself cannot stand. United, we stood tall. The issues that symbolizes our common fight and that bring us together, whether it is extremely poverty, inequality, slums, social exclusion and marginalization, gender-based discrimination, humanitarian crisis, conflicts, climate change, or high unemployment, deserve more attention than our differences. The solution that unifies us, which we have identified as sustainable urban development, is the key to sustainable development. Well-planned and well-managed urbanization can be a powerful tool for sustainable development for both developing and developed countries, from Bamako to New York, from Beijing to Rio de Janeiro, and from Mexico City to Kuala Lumpur. We need renewed commitment to ensure that we build inclusive, sustainable, and resilient cities. For 70% of humanity will live in cities by 2050. Therefore, solving cities' problem will make it much more easier to achieve the SDG, including along the urban-rural continuum. At this assembly, we have also shown how the new urban agenda can help make the future possible. This is the renewed mission of UN Habitat and the focus of our strategic plan 2020 to 2023. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, our work together this week, the journey that we have taken together is not the end. In reality, it represents the beginning of a story of transformation and change. We have laid strong foundation this week. Now it is time to build on them and create a world where no one is left behind. For this reason, I would like to reiterate these 3 calls to action. 1, strongly position sustainable urbanization at the center of your development priorities. through deliberate effort to implement the new urban agenda, strengthening the urban governance structure and institution, adopting integrated sustainable urban development policies and plans, and implementing impact-based projects and programs. Adopt policy solutions that carefully promote science, technology, and innovation in fulfilling the promises of 2030 agenda, including using artificial intelligence to support decision-making process and to efficiently and inclusively deliver basics and social services that transform life in cities. I call once more for development, transfer, dissemination, and diffusion of environmentally sound technologies to developing countries. Invest in UN Habitat. Bring ideas, solutions, expertise, and resources. A stronger UN Habitat signifies a stronger and result-oriented implementation of the new urban agenda and SDG. We are committed to working with you. While we sincerely appreciate earmark contribution, it is core non-earmark contribution that will reduce fragmentation of our work, enable us to achieve impact while increasing predictability and flexibility in the implementation of the priorities agreed together in the strategic plan. Before I conclude, to keep the flame burning and the spirit of this first assembly alive, I would like to invite you to passionately celebrate Urban October from 1st to 31st October 2019. Let's rejoice during the World Habitat Day to be celebrated on the 7th October 2019 in Cameroon. Let's renew our commitment to the new urban agenda and the SDG in the Asia-Pacific Urban Forum on 16 to 18 October in Penang, Malaysia. Let's jubilate our World Cities Day to be celebrated on the 31st of October in Ekaterinburg in Russian Federation. And I warmly invite you to the next World Urban Forum in Abu Dhabi from 8 to 13 of February 2020. I would like to thank my colleague in UN Habitat and the UN family in Nairobi and all the staff and volunteers who have made this first assembly a memorable milestone. In the midst of all legislative and normative work, I was able to meet with some of you through 61 bilateral meetings. I also like to acknowledge and thank Mr. Victor Kisop, my Deputy Executive Director, who also held 25 bilateral meetings and who headed the Assembly Task Force. This made it possible for the new UN Habitat to take its first steps. This assembly would not have been possible without the contribution of the member state. I am grateful to all who have contributed in kind and in cash, but I must take this opportunity to thank the host country, Kenya. Kenya's support has been most generous. My sincere gratitude to the President Uhuru Kenyatta, the government and people of Kenya, to the 13 Kenyan civil servants who have been working with us. We will always remember your contribution to this assembly. I would like to thank our Muslim colleagues, brothers and sisters who work tirelessly in the holy months of Ramadan. Shukran. To all the member states, delegates and stakeholders, thank you for being patient and accommodating. You have been the story of this assembly. I wish you safe travel back home. Finally, I would like to assure all of you, and also those who have been following us on social media, everyone in the wider world, that UN Habitat is back. We are here to walk with you in the rest of our journey into a brighter urban future where no one and no place is left behind. I would like to call to action, global action, local impact. Thank you very much. Asante sana.
I thank the Executive Director for her visionary closing remarks. And I ask, do any regional groups another wish to make closing remarks for this final session? Okay. All right. You know, when the idea was first brought Mexico to take over the presidency of this assembly, this was all new to us. But because of our belief and faith in multilateralism and the need to put UN Habitat back in its rightful footing, us as a country decided to take up the challenge, and I can tell you that I am very glad that we did. I am glad because of the tremendous cooperation I have received from all of you, delegations, your understanding of the reasons why we are here and not letting any challenges get in the way of the purpose of which you are here. And for that, on behalf of myself, of my country, Mexico, of the regional group of Latin America and the Caribbean states, which I have to thank also very much. I thank you, and we are truly grateful for your support. To my bureau, I thank you immensely for being there and for working with me. I want to thank especially Ambassador of Mexico, Erasmo Martinez, and his team, and also my colleagues, Javier Gileta and Camila Cepeda, for being with me during this week. And if you allow me, I would like also to focus on the following individuals also. I wish to thank the Committee of Permanent Representatives for the tremendous preparation towards this assembly. Without this work of preparation, we'd probably still be here at midnight. So, a distinguished member of the CPR, thank you very much. You will agree with me that Ambassador Coimbra, his dedication, his desire to see this organization on its rightful footing began even before he set foot as PR of Brazil to UN Habitat. So Ambassador Coimbra hit the ground running from the open-ended working group, including traveling to New York to assist with the strengthening of the organization at the General Assembly. When he came back as the chair of the CPR, he demonstrated an exceptional leadership with this, and for this assembly we are very grateful. Even during the current assembly, he also took the role of chairing the drafting committee, and together with the members of the drafting committee we have to come to a successful conclusion on the pertinent documents, which are few documents but very, very well written and very consensus. Distinguished colleagues, join me in thanking Ambassador Coimbra and the government of Brazil for this exceptional contribution. Allow me also to express my sincere gratitude and appreciation to another distinguished member of the CPR, Mrs. Lori Dando, for her leadership skills in steering the first meeting of the Executive Board in a seamless manner, and I am confident that the Executive Board will perform exactly the way it is expected and designed to perform. Distinguished delegate, I will now like, I want an applause for her, please. Yes. I will now like to focus on an exceptional woman with an incredible team of dedicated staff, without whom we would have faced a number of challenges. Of course, I am referring to Mrs. Maimouna Morsharif, took over She took over an organization that was at its knees, but that did not deter him. Thank you very much. She committed herself together with her staff to work to ensure that the dream of mankind for dignified human settlement for all is not lost. Through her, we have all come to believe in UN Habitat, even to the point of heads of state raising our first assembly. You will agree with me that none of us knew that the outcome of this assembly will be, but we are living here with tremendous confidence in the organization. So, Madame Maimouna, thank you for keeping humanity's dream alive. Our special gratitude to our staff who worked tirelessly to make sure we have achieved that we can come here to achieve. Among those staff members is one individual who, although not from Habitat, dedicated his time to just make sure we work together and are on the right path. So I especially thank Mr. Stadler Tengro. My sincere appreciation. Your advice has been extremely useful. Thank you very much, Stadler. And also I want to thank Mr. Chris Mensa and his team for his very special support. Finally, distinguished delegates, words cannot be enough for me to appreciate what this great country of Kenya has done for us. Hosting the organization, receiving us at the airport, throwing numerous receptions, making our lives comfortable, coming to this compound twice a week. How many heads of the state would devote such time to any organization? Yes, thank you very much for Kenya's government. Mr. Minister, please convey our sincere gratitude to your head of state, President Kenyatta, and to all other presidents and prime ministers who came, President Salva Kiir Mayardit of South Sudan, Prime Minister of Fiji, Frank Bainimarama, and Prime Minister of Yemen, Ahmed Obeid bin Daga. Please let all of them know how much we appreciate their time and dedication. Finally, in my capacity of head of the Mexican delegation, I express my deepest appreciation to the group of Latin America and the Caribbean states for their valuable and generous support that made it possible for us, Mexico, to assume this extraordinary opportunity of being president of this historical first assembly of UN Habitat. And last but not least, my gratitude to interpreters upstairs.
Translators.
For translators, for the staff that organized the red clothing staff, thank you very much. And I thank you all for your trust. The meeting is adjourned. Have a nice trip.